Well, we've heard from Raheem Jaffer, we've heard from Nazim Galani, we've heard from Helena Georges, we've heard from Derek Snowdy, the cast of characters in this Raheem Jaffer-Helena Georges affair. Now let's hear from Scott and Jamie. Point of order are here. Jamie Watt and Scott Reed.
Thanks. Well, Evan, as you know, the tulips may be out in Ottawa, but all this town wants to talk about is Rahimelena. It's the saga that's got the town abuzz and just won't go away. This week, contradictions all over the place. Helena Georges, Magnum PI wannabe Derek Snowdy, and even the Prime Minister's office itself, all contradicting each other. Scott, in this whole drama, have you figured out who the hell you can believe?
Believe? Look, I believe the Habs are on a mission from God. Now, riddle me this, Batman. What does Sidney Crosby and Helena Georges have in common? Answer? Nothing. You know why? Sidney actually knows why he was knocked out on his can. It's because he couldn't get past the Habs. Helena's still left in the dark. And that, I think, really is the fundamental issue here. Even the Jim Rockford wannabe that was on Parliament Hill yesterday says that he didn't give the Conservatives a single thing to kick her out of cabinet with. Yet the Prime Minister's office says it was Nero Wolf's reasoning that got her kicked out. So listen, here's the message to Conservatives. This Prime Minister, he hasn't got your back. He'll throw you on the bonfire, under the bus. He'll strap you to the railway tracks.
Scott,
loyalty, it's not in that man's dictionary.
Scott, where you see scandal, I see opportunity. Business opportunity. Buddy, you should get on the next plane, get down here in Ottawa. You and I are going to go, and we're going to pitch communications advice to Derek Snowdy. And the first piece of advice we're going to give him, don't show up at a parliamentary hearing in a red Ferrari that isn't even your own, especially when you're $13 million in the hole. Secondly, enough of the references to hookers. Finished. Over. And finally, this is such a he said, you said, I said, she said saga. It belongs in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Jamie, we knew the Ferrari wasn't his. It belongs to Robin Masters. The real question the committee should have asked is Higgins actually Robin Masters? We never did learn the answer. All right, now, we got a hung parliament in the UK, and it led to, oh my word, a coalition government, something that Conservatives on this side of the pond sneer at. Jamie, how can it be that a coalition is good enough for Conservatives in Britain, but is a sign of grand evil to Conservatives here in Canada?
Listen, Scott, you're nothing if not predictable. I knew you were going to go there, and it's a fundamentally intellectually dishonest place. To compare what happened in happening in the UK to what happened here is comparing an apple to an orange. In the UK, the party that went up in the polls, the party that had the most seats, is now in power. In Canada, the party that went down in the polls, whose leader had the worst rating of any of his fellow leaders, and finally the worst leading Liberal approval rating in Liberal history, also went down. It's not the same, and to suggest that it is just dead wrong. But I'll tell you, Britons are about to discover one thing that Canadians know. When Conservatives are in charge, parliaments are inevitably well hung.
Okay, well, that's nice. I got two words for you, buddy. Busted. You know why? Because your logic doesn't make sense. In 2005, it was Stephen Harper that was beating the bushes for a coalition government, and he was going to lead it with the Bloc Québécois. And he would have had fewer seats, he would have had less popular vote, and less popular support than the party in power. So sorry, man, it all breaks down. Stephen Harper, he is Mr. Situational Ethics. And you want to know why it works in Britain? It works because you got a Conservative Party that actually understands the words compromise and humility. Two phrases that Stephen Harper has no time for. This guy isn't interested in compromise. When he looks across the table, he thinks, how hard can I bite into that person's throat?
Well, also in Ottawa this week, MPs are still in overtime, Game 7 overtime, as they grapple with Speaker Milliken's ruling on the Afghan detainee document issue. Scott, once that agreement is finally reached, is it going to put the issue behind us?
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of people that say, it's time to put this thing behind us because you know what? People don't care. Well, that drives me bananas because you know what? I actually think that it's not just about whether or not it turns votes. You know what? Protecting and ensuring the integrity of our armed forces, demonstrating that our government will be accountable, actually reinforcing the fundamental Westminster principle that Parliament is superior and sovereign. These are actually things that matter whether votes turn on them or not, and they're worth fighting for and they're worth fighting over. And you know, the reason we don't have an agreement yet can be explained by two words: Stephen Harper.
Well, I mean, I just think that's nonsense. But what we're really seeing happen is Parliament working, and Parliament working the way Canadians intended. And I actually think that all of the people that are involved in this process are going to get a payoff for it, because they're actually behaving the way Canadians sent them to Ottawa to behave. They're acting like parliamentarians. They're making a compromise. They're finding a solution that both sides could live with. And that's how Parliament ought to be working. It stands in stark contrast to the craziness around the Rahimelena show that we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. And I think the more parliamentarians behave like this, the better off we're all going to be. It's not a partisan issue. This is about raising Parliament up. It's a genuinely complicated issue. There's cross pressures on both sides. The Prime Minister has a job to do to protect national interest and protect national security. Parliamentarians have their job to do as well. And when those two things come together and they're worked out in an intelligent, adult way, everybody wins.
This Prime Minister and all Prime Ministers have a principle that they must adhere to, and that is that they answer to Parliament and the people. This Prime Minister doesn't like to answer to anyone, and that's the fundamental problem. Now, finally, it's prediction time. It's been a rocky week in Europe. The economies are in grand trouble. We now have $1 billion, I should say $1 trillion, that's many, many billions of billions, $1 trillion bailout package. Jamie, how big is that, and is it going to affect our recovery in Canada? Could it push us back into recession?
Well, $1 trillion, that's 10,000 sponsorship scandals, or one of Obama's magic healthcare plans. And I wouldn't wish that spending on anybody. Obviously, it's a big, complicated problem. But in all seriousness, Canada's finances are in good shape. They're under the careful stewardship of the finance minister. Jim Flaherty's been paying attention to this for a long period of time.
He's the $60 billion deficit,
he's the
largest deficit in Canadian history.
He's the dean of the finance ministers. The Economist magazine lauded Canada's economy, and more importantly, he's not doing it on the back of the provinces. You know that old expression, no child left behind? Well, he believes no province left behind. So he's not doing it the way your party balanced the budget, by slashing the hell out of transfer payments to the provinces. He's actually doing it by keeping them whole. What a difference it makes.
Yeah, right. Listen, your former boss, Mr. Flaherty, inherited a $13 billion surplus. Before the recession hit, he turned it into a deficit. We now have the largest deficit in Canadian history. We have the largest household debt. People are struggling under record household debt. So that's the record of this finance minister and this prime minister. Now let's talk about Europe, and let's talk about
this government likes to pretend around the world.
This government likes to pretend, yeah, and you inherited the good and you took and created the bad. We got big problems in Europe, and if Canada doesn't participate, we're going to find ourselves victim to that as well. Well, Evan, that's going to be it for us this week. We'll be back here in 7 days when the Habs will still be great, and I'll still be right, and Jamie, you'll still be wrong.
I'm Jamie Watt. See you next week, Evan.
I will agree with one thing. The Habs will still be around. I agree with that. Just ahead, the Canadian Forces Disaster Assistance Response Team, known as DART, has helped save lives.